March 1945, Western Germany. Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery stood at the center of the most carefully constructed military operation of the European War. For months, he had been planning Operation Plunder. It was to be the largest deliberate river crossing since the Normandy landings, a massive orchestrated assault across the Rhine River, the last great natural defensive line of the Third Reich. For Montgomery, this was not merely another operation, it was redemption. 6 months earlier, Operation Market Garden had failed at Arnhem. What was meant to end the war by Christmas had instead become a costly lesson in overreach. Critics whispered, supporters defended, but Montgomery remembered every casualty report. The Rhine would erase that memory. Operation Plunder was staggering in scope. More than 80,000 British and Canadian troops prepared along the western bank. Over 5,000 artillery pieces were positioned wheel to heel, ready to unleash a bombardment designed to crush German defenses into dust. Thousands of tons of ammunition had been stockpiled forward. Engineers had rehearsed bridge construction on rivers in England, timing every movement down to the minute. 2 full airborne divisions, over 16,000 paratroopers, would drop behind German lines to secure road junctions and prevent reinforcements from interfering. Pontoon bridges had been prefabricated and staged. Medical stations calculated projected casualty numbers. Meteorologists had advised on optimal weather windows. Supply depots were organized with mathematical precision. Fuel, rations, medical kits, spare parts, every item accounted for. The timetable reflected Montgomery's philosophy. The artillery barrage would begin at precisely 2100 hours on March 23rd. Infantry boats would launch at 2130. Engineers would begin bridge construction at 2200. By dawn on March 24th, British armor would roll across the Rhine and into the heart of Germany. This was how Montgomery believed wars should be fought through, preparation so overwhelming that victory became inevitable. No reckless improvisation, no dramatic theatrics, no gambling, victory by calculation. He even invited Prime Minister Winston Churchill to witness the crossing. Churchill accepted eagerly, eager to stand on the Rhine's western bank as British arms delivered what Montgomery promised would be the defining blow of the European war. Operation Plunder would prove that disciplined, methodical military science, not speed, not ego, won modern wars. But 60 miles to the south, near the German town of Oppenheim, another general studied the same river and saw something entirely different. George Smith Patton did not believe in perfect plans. He believed in perfect timing. While Montgomery assembled his massive force in the north, Patton's Third Army had been racing across southern Germany with relentless aggression. His armored columns advanced so quickly that supply lines strained to keep pace. Towns fell before defenders could organize. German units retreated in confusion. By mid-March, Third Army reached the Rhine near Oppenheim. Patton stood on the western bank, binoculars raised. His reconnaissance patrols had been probing German defenses for days. What they reported surprised even him. The eastern bank was thinly defended. German high command had concentrated forces opposite Montgomery's sector. They expected the great British assault in the north. They assumed the Americans would coordinate, wait, and follow the grand plan. Patton smiled when he read the reports on March 22nd. His staff gathered around the map table that evening. Some urged caution. Wait for coordination. Wait for Eisenhower's authorization. Wait for artillery support. Patton listened with visible impatience. The Germans expected Montgomery. They did not expect him. The defenses were weak now. They would not remain weak tomorrow. Every day spent waiting meant more German reinforcements, more fortifications, more casualties. Every day the war, continued. More men died, American, British, Russian. If crossing tonight ended the war even 1 week sooner, what was protocol worth compared to thousands of lives? To Montgomery, the Rhine was a sacred barrier demanding ceremony. To Patton, it was a river wide. Yes, defended barely crossable. Absolutely. Night fell over Oppenheim on March 22, 1945. At 2200 hours, the first canvas assault boats slid quietly into the dark water. There was no massive artillery barrage, no sweeping searchlights. Infantry from the 5th Infantry Division paddled across in near silence. The only sounds were wooden oars dipping in the faint current, brushing canvas. German sentries were unprepared. Some were asleep. Many were inexperienced replacements. Older men and teenage boys pressed into service as veteran units, rushed north to face Montgomery's anticipated assault. Gunfire erupted in confusion, scattered and panicked. American infantry reached the eastern bank, surged forward with grenades and rifles, and secured a bridgehead before German commanders fully understood what was happening. Within an hour, the Americans had established a foothold 300 yards deep. Engineers moved immediately. Pontoon sections were floated into position under torchlight. Decking was hammered into place, connections welded, and the work proceeded with astonishing speed. By 4 in the morning on March 23rd, the first pontoon bridge was operational. At dawn, the very morning, Montgomery's artillery barrage was scheduled to begin. American Sherman tanks rolled across the Rhine at Oppenheim. Casualties were astonishingly low. Fewer than 100 killed or wounded in the initial crossing. The Rhine, proclaimed impenetrable by German propaganda for centuries, had fallen in a single night. Patton arrived at the bridgehead shortly after sunrise. He walked onto the pontoon bridge, paused deliberately, and relieved himself into the river. It was crude. It was theatrical. It was calculated the photograph would become legendary. But Patton understood something deeper than spectacle. In modern war, perception mattered as much as terrain. Within hours, war correspondents embedded with Third Army transmitted the story. Headlines exploded across newspapers in America and Britain. On the morning of March 23rd, Patton crosses the Rhine. Third Army breaches Germany's last barrier. The daring night crossing, the minimal casualties, the contrast between months of preparation and a single audacious stroke. It was irresistible. Operation Plunder had not yet begun, and already it had been overshadowed. In Montgomery's headquarters, staff officers stared at teletype reports in disbelief. They searched for clarification, hoping for exaggeration. There was none. American forces were across. Bridges were functioning. Armor was advancing. Operation Plunder, meant to define British military excellence, would now be remembered as the Second Crossing. Montgomery's public reaction was controlled. He described Patton's action as a limited tactical maneuver incomparable to the scale and strategic significance of Operation Plunder. Privately, he was furious. To Montgomery, this was not merely a matter of pride. It was a dangerous breach of discipline. If generals could ignore coordination and act independently whenever opportunity appeared, the chain of command meant nothing. Coalition warfare would collapse into chaos. A success achieved through insubordination, he believed, was more dangerous than honorable failure. If Patton's behavior went unpunished, what precedent did it set? What if the next gamble failed catastrophically? Montgomery drafted a formal communication to Supreme Allied Commander Dwight David Eisenhower. His argument was precise. Patton's Way unauthorized crossing undermined coordination and threatened Allied duty. Regardless of tactical success, discipline must prevail. He requested that Patton be relieved of command. The message reached Eisenhower's headquarters on March 24th as Operation Plunder commenced its own meticulously planned assault. Eisenhower read the demand alone in his office. Outside, 2 Allied armies were advancing into Germany. Inside, he faced a decision that could fracture the alliance at the edge of victory. The case for removing Patton was compelling. Discipline was foundational. If orders became optional, large-scale operations would disintegrate. British sacrifices and prestige mattered deeply for post-war stability. Alienating Britain at this moment was risky, but the case for keeping Patton was equally powerful. Third Army was the fastest-moving force in Europe. Removing Patton could slow the advance by weeks. Every additional week meant more casualties. Politically, firing America's most famous general for crossing too quickly would ignite outrage at home. Eisenhower reduced the dilemma to one question: what would end the war faster? On March 25th, he drafted his reply. Diplomatic in tone, firm in meaning. He acknowledged Montgomery's concerns. He praised Operation Plunder. He emphasized unity. And he refused to remove Patton. Discipline mattered. Coordination mattered. But at this stage of the war, results mattered more. Montgomery accepted the decision professionally, though resentment lingered. Third Army surged deeper into southern Germany at astonishing speed. Towns fell daily. German units surrendered in waves. By April, Patton's forces had penetrated farther into Germany than many pre-war planners thought possible in months. Operation Plunder succeeded brilliantly. British and Canadian forces crossed with precision. Bridges carried supplies that would sustain the final push. Both philosophies had produced victory. Yet history remembered who crossed first. The Rhine controversy became a case study in command philosophy. Was Montgomery correct that systematic planning and discipline must always dominate? Or was Patton right? That fleeting opportunity must be seized instantly, before it disappears. Modern militaries still debate the question. But perhaps the river itself offers a quieter lesson. The Rhine was never truly impenetrable. It was treated as impenetrable because tradition said so. Centuries of doctrine insisted a river that wide, that deep, required massive preparation to cross. Patton looked at the same river and saw something else. Not a sacred barrier, not a symbol, just water. That shift in perception from obstacle to opportunity compressed what might have been weeks into a single night. The old rules did not shatter with an explosion. They dissolved quietly beneath the splash of canvas boats in darkness. Victory in March of 1945 did not belong exclusively to methodical preparation or reckless boldness. It belonged to leadership, willing to balance both, and to a supreme commander wise enough to tolerate brilliance without letting it fracture unity. As the war rushed toward its conclusion, the Rhine flowed on, indifferent to pride or rivalry. But in that midnight crossing, something subtle changed. Not just the course of an army, the definition of how modern wars could be won. If you've watched this far, you understand this wasn't just about a river. It was about ego, alliance politics, command philosophy, and the razor-thin line between insubordination and genius. Let me know in the comments. Was Montgomery right about discipline, or was Patton right about speed? And if you found this deep dive valuable, share it with someone who loves real World War II history, not just headlines. This is WWII Frontline Shadow, where we don't just tell you what happened, we show you why it mattered.